The sun rose slow over the red earth, and the wind moved like a quiet witness across the plain. A young Apache girl stood near the broken fence, her hands bound not by rope, but by shame. She felt eyes on her, and the weight of silence pressed harder than any chain. She turned her face away and whispered, "Stop looking," though no sound carried far in that empty land. Her life had been shaped by loss and wandering by lessons taught through pain and endurance. She had learned to stand tall even when fear trembled inside her chest. She remembered her mother teaching her to greet the morning with courage and to never let cruelty decide her worth. Those memories burned warm as the cold air cut her skin. The men who had brought her here were gone for now, leaving her with the land and her thoughts. She refused to cry because tears felt like surrender, and she had sworn to survive. She focused on breathing, on the rhythm of the earth, and on the belief that dignity could not be taken if she did not give it away. Not far away, a lone rancher guided his horse along a narrow trail. He was a man shaped by quiet work and long nights beneath open skies. His life was simple and hard-earned, and he trusted the land more than people. When he noticed movement near the fence, he slowed his eyes, saw a figure standing stiff against the wind, and something in his chest tightened. He did not rush forward because respect mattered to him. He called out softly to announce his presence and waited. The girl heard the voice, and flinched. Shame rose again, and she wrapped her arms closer as if to hide from the world. She did not want pity, and she did not want judgment. She wanted to be seen as strong, not broken. The rancher stopped at a distance, and dismounted. He removed his hat and placed it against his chest, a sign of peace. He spoke of water and shelter, and no harm meant. His words were steady and kind like the low hum of the plains. She studied him from the corner of her eye, measuring intent as her elders had taught her. People believed wisdom lived in patience, and she chose to listen. He spoke of the coming heat and the long road ahead, and offered help without demand. She felt a small crack open the wall around her heart. Hope slipped in like light through a canyon. She nodded once, not in submission, but in agreement to survive another day. Together they moved toward the ranch, slow and careful. The rancher kept his distance, walking beside his horse, so she would not feel cornered. He told stories of storms and seasons of loss and rebuilding. He did not ask her past, and that silence felt like a gift. She began to breathe easier with each step. The land around them seemed to watch approvingly, as if the earth itself remembered old promises of protection. At the ranch, he offered a blanket and turned away while she wrapped herself. He set water near her feet and waited, looking toward the horizon. She felt seen, without being stared at, respected. Without being owned. The humiliation that had burned so fiercely began to fade, replaced by a fragile sense of safety. She realized that strength could also mean accepting help. As night approached, the sky filled with stars and the world felt wide again. The girl sat by the fire, warming her hands, and spoke her name aloud, reclaiming it from fear. The rancher listened and nodded, honoring the sound of it. In that quiet moment, two paths crossed, not by chance, but by choice. The journey ahead would be hard, yet the first step had been taken, and dignity still lived within her heart. Morning arrived quietly, and the girl woke before the sun. She sat near the dying embers of the fire and listened to the land breathing around her. For the first time in many days, fear did not command her thoughts. She felt cautious, but steady like a tree that bends yet does not break. The rancher was already awake, tending to his animals, moving with calm purpose. He did not look at her directly. Instead, he spoke to the horse and cattle, giving her space to exist without pressure. She watched his routine and noticed how he treated every living thing with care. He offered food by setting it nearby and stepping back. That simple act restored something inside her. She ate slowly, tasting gratitude. With every bite, memories of her people returned, songs of survival and stories of respect for the earth. She realized that dignity could be rebuilt piece by piece, just like trust. Later, the rancher spoke of the land and how storms had taken his family years ago. He had learned to live with silence and to let time teach him patience. He shared these words not to gain sympathy, but to show understanding. She listened and felt a shared thread of loss between them. Pain recognized pain. Without needing explanation, she told him she wished to travel north when her strength returned. He nodded and said the road would still be there waiting. The day grew warm, and the rancher showed her a place near the creek where she could wash without being seen. He turned his back and waited. She felt tears rise, not from humiliation this time, but from relief. Clean water touched her skin and carried away the dust of fear. She whispered thanks to the earth and promised herself she would walk forward with courage. When she returned, she found a simple dress folded neatly on a rock. He had left it. Without words, she understood the respect in his silence and chose to accept the gift without shame. Clothing did not define her worth, but kindness deserved acknowledgement. She stepped into the sunlight feeling lighter than before. As hours passed, they worked side by side in quiet cooperation. She helped gather herbs, and he repaired fences. Their movements found a natural rhythm, neither tried to lead nor follow. And in that balance, she felt strong again. The rancher spoke of rebuilding after loss, and how helping another person had once saved him from despair. His words planted seeds of hope in her heart. By evening, clouds gathered, and thunder rolled in the distance. She felt a familiar fear of storms rooted in past trauma. The rancher noticed, and spoke calmly, explaining how the land welcomed rain. As renewal, they sheltered together under the open sky, watching lightning carve the horizon. She breathed deeply, and let the storm pass through her instead of over her. That night she dreamed of her ancestors walking beside her. Their voices told her she was not broken, only tested. She woke, with resolve. The humiliation that once defined her story now felt like a chapter, not the whole book. She knew challenges still waited ahead, but she also knew she was no longer alone. As dawn approached, she thanked the rancher and told him she would stay a few days to regain strength. He agreed, without condition, offering companionship. Without ownership, the land listened, and seemed to approve. Two wounded spirits had found a moment of peace, and from that moment a path forward began to form, built on respect, courage, and quiet hope. The third morning carried a different weight. As the land itself sensed a turning point, the girl rose with purpose and stepped outside, feeling the cool ground beneath her feet. She no longer shrank from the open sky. Instead, she lifted her face and breathed deeply, letting strength settle into her bones. The rancher greeted her with a simple nod, not as a guardian, but as an equal. That small gesture affirmed what she was beginning to believe about herself. They spent the early hours repairing a damaged section of fence together. The work was slow and deliberate. Her hands remembered the skills taught by her elders, and she moved with growing confidence. The rancher noticed, but did not comment. He allowed her ability to speak for itself. Respect and silence became the language they shared. The sun climbed higher, and sweat traced lines of effort, not fear. As they worked, she spoke for the first time of the tribe she had lost and the journey that had taken her far from home. Her words came steady. Without breaking, she spoke of betrayal and humiliation, and how she had been forced to stand exposed before strangers. A memory still burned, but it no longer consumed her. The rancher listened fully, facing her. Without judgment, he did not interrupt or offer solutions. He simply honored her truth. When she finished, she expected emptiness, but instead felt lighter, as if the story had been carried away by the wind. The rancher responded by sharing his own burden. He spoke of choosing isolation after loss, believing solitude was safer than attachment. Over time, he learned that walls built for protection could also become prisons. That realization had led him to help her. Without question, their shared understanding forged a deeper connection rooted in healing rather than dependency. Midday heat settled over the land, and they rested near the shade of an old tree. The girl traced patterns in the dust, recalling symbols from her people representing endurance and renewal. She explained their meanings, and the rancher listened with interest, appreciating a culture older than his own. She realized her heritage was not something to hide, but something to carry forward with pride. Later, a group of travelers appeared on the horizon. Their presence stirred old fears within her body, reacted before her mind could reason. The rancher sensed a change and positioned himself nearby, not blocking her path, but offering silent support. The travelers passed without incident, yet the moment revealed how deeply trauma could linger. She acknowledged the fear instead of denying it, and that acknowledgement felt like progress. As evening approached, the rancher invited her to ride with him to a high ridge overlooking the valley. From there, she saw the vastness of the land stretching endlessly. It reminded her that no single moment of humiliation could define such a wide life. The wind carried freedom and possibility. She felt small yet unbroken, a part of something greater than her pain. They sat quietly watching the sun sink below the horizon. The rancher spoke of choices, and how courage often appeared in unexpected forms. Sometimes it was a bravery to walk away, sometimes it was the strength to stay and heal. She considered his words, and realized she had already made a brave choice by surviving and continuing forward. Night settled gently, and stars filled the sky. She felt peace settle alongside, and the fire crackled, and she found herself laughing softly at a simple story he told. The sound surprised her, but it felt right. Laughter became another sign of healing, proof that joy could return even after deep wounds. Before sleep, she thanked the rancher, not with words of debt, but with sincerity. He accepted it without pride, understanding that help given freely required nothing in return. She lay down under the open sky, feeling whole in a way she had not felt for a long time. The humiliation that once defined her had transformed into resilience, and the journey ahead no longer felt impossible. The fourth day began with a quiet tension that neither of them spoke aloud. The air felt heavier, and the girl sensed change moving toward her like distant thunder. She woke early and sat alone watching the light stretch across the land. Her strength had grown, yet she knew healing often brought new challenges. She reminded herself of the teachings of her people, that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward with it. The rancher prepared for a longer ride that morning. He explained there were nearby settlements and trade routes that sometimes carried trouble. His honesty was not meant to frighten her, but to keep truth between them. She appreciated that and chose to join him not as someone seeking protection, but as someone ready to face the world again. She mounted the horse with steady hands, feeling capable and alert. As they rode across the plain, she noticed signs of change tracks in the dust-broken grass, and the smell of smoke carried by the wind. Her body tightened as memories surfaced. She did not look away. Instead, she focused on the present, on the rhythm of the horse's steps, and the wide sky above. The rancher watched her closely, without hovering ready to act, but trusting her strength. They reached an abandoned outpost where supplies were sometimes left behind. The place stirred discomfort within her, as empty structures often reminded her of captivity. She paused and said to herself, choosing to step forward rather than retreat inside. She found simple tools and cloth. She selected what was useful and left the rest, respecting the space. She realized she was reclaiming control over environments that once held power over her. While returning, they encountered a small group of men near the trail. Conversation grew tense. As eyes lingered too long, the girl felt the old humiliation rise, but she met their gaze calmly and stood tall beside the rancher. Her presence was firm and unyielding. The men moved on, sensing no weakness to exploit. In that moment, she understood how far she had come. Strength was not loud, but unmistakable. Later that afternoon, she spoke of leaving soon. Her voice carried certainty, not fear. She thanked the rancher for what he had given her: space, safety, and respect. He replied that she owed him nothing, and that her survival was payment enough. They shared a quiet understanding that their paths had crossed for a reason, but were not meant to bind each other. As the sun lowered, she prepared her belongings and walked the creek one last time. She reflected on how humiliation had once stripped her sense of self, and how dignity had been slowly restored through choice and compassion. She realized she was no longer defined by what had been done to her, but by how she responded afterward. That evening, they shared a final meal together. The rancher offered guidance on safe routes and places of water. He spoke as one traveler to another. She listened carefully, committing the knowledge to memory. Their exchange felt balanced, free of obligation or control. When night fell, she stood beneath the stars and spoke a quiet prayer in her native tongue. She honored the ancestors who had guided her steps and the stranger who had shown her respect. Without ownership, the rancher listened from a distance, understanding the sacredness of the moment. Before rest, she felt a mix of gratitude and resolved the road ahead would test her again. But she was no longer the girl who begged others to stop looking. She was a woman who could meet the world without shame. Part 4, her journey closed not with an ending, but with readiness for what lay beyond the horizon. The fifth morning arrived with a sense of farewell. Carried on the wind, the girl woke before dawn and packed what little she carried. Each movement felt deliberate and calm. She was no longer preparing to escape, but to continue. Her heart felt steady, and her mind clear. The land around the ranch seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the turning of her path. The rancher met her near the corral and offered a horse for part of the journey. He explained the animal knew the safest route for many miles. She accepted with gratitude, understanding the gift as trust, not charity. She placed her hand on the horse's neck and felt confidence flow through her. She had traveled in fear before. Now she traveled with purpose. They rode together for a while in comfortable silence. The sky shifted from dark to gold, and the world felt open again. She reflected on how humiliation had once reduced her to silence, and how now her voice lived within her even when she did not speak. Strength had returned, not as anger, but as clarity. Along the trail, they encountered signs of hardship, abandoned camps, and broken tools, evidence of others struggling to the same land. She felt compassion rather than dread. She knew suffering did not belong to her alone, and that realization eased the weight. She carried. The rancher spoke of how every traveler left a mark, and how kindness could outlast cruelty. Those words stayed with her. At a crossroads where the horse would turn back, they stopped. This was a moment of separation. She dismounted and stood facing the rancher. She thanked him again, not with bowed head, but with direct gaze. Her gratitude was strong, and equally he responded by wishing her safe passage and reminding her that courage would guide her better than fear. Before parting, she shared a final truth. She said that when she had begged others to stop looking, it was because she believed her worth had been taken. That belief no longer ruled her. The rancher nodded, acknowledging the transformation without claiming credit. He watched as she mounted the horse and turned toward the open road. As she traveled alone, the rhythm of the journey filled her with quiet joy. She sang softly in her native tongue a song of endurance, and belonging to land echoed her voice and carried it forward. She felt connected to something ancient and unbreakable. Her identity stood whole again. Midday heat tested her resolve, but she pressed on using the skills she reclaimed. She found water, where the rancher said it would be, and rested beneath a tree. She smiled, realizing she trusted herself. She no longer needed constant reassurance. Her choices guided her forward. As evening approached, she reached a high plain where the skies stretched endlessly. She looked back once, not in longing, but in appreciation. Then she faced forward again. The road ahead symbolized possibility, not danger. Each step carried her further from humiliation and closer to self-respect. Night settled, and she made camp alone. She felt no loneliness, only peace. The stars watched over her, as they always had. She knew challenges still waited, but she also knew she carried the strength to face them. Part 5 of her journey ended with motion and confidence, and the certainty that her story now belonged to her alone. The final stretch of her journey began with quiet determination. The girl woke beneath the open sky and felt grounded in her body and spirit. She no longer measured the world by threat, but by possibility. The morning light touched her face, and she welcomed it as a companion. She gathered her things and set out, guided by instinct and the lessons earned through hardship. As she traveled, she encountered a small community near the river. People moved with routine purpose, and children laughed freely. She approached without fear and announced herself with confidence. Her posture spoke. Before words did she offer help in exchange for rest, and was welcomed with cautious kindness. Over time, trust grew as it had before, but this time she knew how to stand within it. She shared stories by the fire, not a humiliation, but a survival. She spoke of choosing dignity when it felt distant, and of learning that strength could live alongside vulnerability. Her voice carried calm authority, and others listened. She realized that her experience held value, and that sharing could light the way for someone else. Days passed, and she found work teaching skills from her people, weaving, tracking, healing with plants. Her heritage flourished through her hands, and words pride replaced the old urge to hide. She felt rooted again, not bound, but connected. She belonged because she chose to belong. One evening, she walked alone to the river and watched the water move steadily forward. It reminded her of her own path, shaped by obstacles, yet persistent. She reflected on the moment she had once pleaded for eyes to turn away. That memory no longer held power. It was a marker of how far she had come, not a wound that defined her. She offered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the land, the ancestors, and the stranger who had shown respect when she needed it most. She understood now that help could be a bridge, not a chain, and that accepting it did not lessen her strength. As seasons changed, she continued onward when the time felt right, leaving each place better than she found. Her journey became one of purpose and choice. Her steps carried intention, and her presence carried calm. In time, she reached the northern land. She had once dreamed of. The mountains stood tall and welcoming. She felt a deep sense of arrival, not because the road ended, but because she had arrived within herself. She stood facing the horizon with steady breath and open heart. The humiliation that once silenced her had transformed into wisdom. Her story no longer asked others to stop looking. It invited them to see strength, dignity, and resilience walking forward unafraid.